Hey everyone, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today we're here to share with you our review of Final Fantasy VII on the Nintendo Switch. And now, I completely understand you may think that we're a little late to the party on this one, but with the recent re-release of the Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation 4, and of course Cloud is in Smash Bros. Ultimate, we figured why not put out a video version of our Final Fantasy VII review. Now we know that there are tons of Nintendo Switch owners that also own PlayStation 4s, but there's also a good majority that don't. For anyone who feels like joining in on some of the hype or just wants to relive a bit of nostalgia, or even just find out Cloud's origin story, we thought some of you might like to know if this is still a worthy way of playing the game. Now this review was originally written by Mitch Vogel for NintendoLife.com, but was reworked into this video by me. The release of Final Fantasy VII in 1997 was a watershed moment for both Square and the role-playing game genre as a whole, forever changing the status quo moving forward. After the previous 6 games had seen a release on Nintendo platforms, this marked the first time that Square's flagship series would be passing over the Big N, and with that change came a massive stylistic shift to the game itself. Ditching the tired swords and sorcery tropes that the previous games had harped on for years, Final Fantasy VII broke new ground by telling a dark and engrossing tale set in a Blade Runner-esque futuristic setting. It's safe to say that we're still feeling the effects of Final Fantasy VII's influence, even in the RPGs of today's platforms. But the real question is, how well does this epic fantasy classic hold up today? Final Fantasy VII follows the adventures of everyone's favorite angsty, spiky-haired protagonist, Cloud Strife, a former soldier now working with the rebels to hit back at a mega corporation that's slowly sucking the life out of their dying planet. Despite Cloud's murky past, which he himself is unsure of at times, things are progressing relatively well in this small resistance campaign. But as the hours roll by and new players are brought into the fold, the gradually widening narrative reveals a much larger story at play that ultimately stems from the complex relationship that exists between Cloud and Sephiroth, the main villain. This is a story about the real dangers of late-stage capitalism and climate change, about the consequence of war and the sacrifices that must be made for the greater good. And despite the often campy and awkward dialogue, it's a story that remains eerily relevant in the modern age. Assuming you haven't been spoiled to most of it by this point and will be experiencing it for the first time, the story is sure to keep you engaged for most of its 40-ish hour run. This is a tale that's packed with plenty of plot twists and turns, and most of the main characters in your party are well written and have believable dimension to them. Plus, despite the brooding and mature storytelling, there's plenty of lighthearted content here to keep things from becoming too bleak. Just when it feels like a bit too much of a downer, Final Fantasy VII demonstrates a remarkable ability to turn the tone around at the drop of a hat if need be, making for an adventure that's as unpredictable as it is enrapturing. Though Final Fantasy VII is notoriously linear compared to some past entries, it still remains unabashedly an old-school Final Fantasy game, with random encounters, turn-based battles, and the ATB system all being par for the course here. As one would expect, the random encounter rate is tediously overbearing in many portions, but it can be helpfully offset by a modern feature Square worked into the re-release, in which clicking down the left stick triples the speed of the whole game, turning those repetitive encounters against boring enemies into blink-and-you'll-miss-it battles. It really can't be highlighted enough how much of a difference this simple addition makes to one's enjoyment of Final Fantasy VII. And while it ultimately stands as a band-aid for a design-based issue, it's an effective one that helps to gloss over some of the creakier aspects of a 2 decades old game. When in combat, the classic battle system of Final Fantasy is present and correct, in which each character on screen has an action bar that, once filled, allows them to attack, cast magic, or perform any other such actions. Even today, this ATB battle system proves to be a remarkably creative way of sidestepping the monotony of a turn-based battle system without losing the spirit and structure of one. It demands your constant attention and decision-making by applying that continuous pressure to make a quick choice while also keeping things simple and straightforward. New at the time to Final Fantasy VII was also the limit break system, which adds a nice incentive for taking hefty beatings from your foes. Every attack a character endures will fill up that character's limit gauge a little bit more, and once it's full, they can unleash a powerful skill that can turn the tide of the battle significantly. A few examples of this are how Ares or Aerith can cast a party-wide healing spell, or how Cloud can unleash his iconic Omni-Slash attack. It's admittedly not very complex, but the limit break system adds a little bit of variety to battles that otherwise become repetitive with time. With all this being said, the combat of Final Fantasy VII nowadays does create something of a been there, done that feeling that can't be easily dismissed. It's the sort of thing that's aged gracefully, but it's also certainly aged. Next to other more modern RPGs, it's tough to not be put off by the antiquated combat design of Final Fantasy VII. But those of you who don't want to deal with combat can just as easily disable random encounters entirely with the click of both sticks. Or you can instantly buff all of your characters to max stats and steamroll over all of your opponents by clicking in the right stick. For those of you that wish to play through the game as it was designed, there's plenty of depth to the Materia system that governs character growth. Ignoring the popular job systems of past games, Final Fantasy VII makes all its characters basically classless, with equipable materia dictating their role in a fight. Materia act as skills that are attached to the armor and items your characters equip, and certain materia equipped on the same piece of equipment will create synergistic buffs, such as how a multiplier materia will allow you to cast an offensive spell that hits all enemies instead of just one. Materia can be swapped between party members at will and level up independently from the characters that wield them, which makes for a customization experience that gives you surprising control over what each party member can contribute to battle. The Materia system feels a bit surface level in many ways, but the real strength here is simply the fun of swapping up character roles every now and then for a change of pace in battle flow. As an early PlayStation title, Final Fantasy VII released right at the peak of that time when everyone in the industry was trying to figure out how to make good games in 3D. And unfortunately, it shows. Even compared to Final Fantasy IX, which released a few years later on the same console, Final Fantasy VII is a rather ugly game to behold, as lumpy character models with Popeye-like anatomies stroll around the grainy, pre-rendered backgrounds. To be fair, the backgrounds themselves aren't half bad, featuring plenty of atmospheric, detailed environments that do a great job of setting the tone. The issue, though, is how much they clash with the 3D models, which stick out like a sore thumb. Though it becomes easier to look past the disparity between the backgrounds and character models as you invest more hours into Final Fantasy VII, it's still all too common to lose track of exactly what your character can or can't interact with on any given screen. There's a reason that pre-rendered backgrounds have been left firmly in the past for video games, and Final Fantasy VII stands as an example of why. Luckily, the soundtrack has lost none of the charm or effect that it had back in the day, and it stands as a testament to the skill of legendary composer Nobuo Uematsu. Final Fantasy VII has a soundtrack as wide-ranging as that of a film, with each track acting as an excellent tone setter for the often emotional events that unfold. Whether it be warm, guitar-laden lullaby of the Village of Calm, or the iconic menacing dirge of the opening sequence, Final Fantasy VII's music is sure to capture your imagination and help drive the narrative forward in ways that the visuals can't quite manage. Final Fantasy VII is the sort of game that speaks for itself, a touchstone of game design that played a large role in setting the standard of RPGs for years to come. It goes without saying that you should give Final Fantasy VII a shot if you consider yourself to be a fan of RPGs, as this is an experience unlike any other in many ways. With that being said, it's also the sort of thing that has since been surpassed in almost every manner by games that took the concept it introduced and expanded upon them in plenty of new and more interesting ways. Final Fantasy VII is a relic of its time, but that doesn't mean it's to be respected any less. If you can look past the obviously antiquated elements, this is a well-paced, engaging RPG that's still fun to play today, and it's more than worthy of your time. We here at Nintendo Life give Final Fantasy VII on the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you'd like to check out our full written review, you can find that along with more content on Final Fantasy VII and plenty of other Final Fantasy games over at nintendolife.com. And since I'm here, I also just wanted to quick mention that I personally have been itching to get my hands on Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS4 since it launched, and I was worried that jumping into this I was going to have sort of a tough time stomaching it, as it's been 15 years or something since I've originally played it on PS1. But surprisingly, like Mitch stated in his review, the more time you spend with the game, the quicker you are to look past its graphical flaws and see its engaging characters and world for the joy and despair it really is. And if I could make one suggestion, if you're not planning to use any of the cheat modifiers that the game now has, at least go into the settings and boost the battle speed. You do have to be a little bit quicker on your feet when it comes to selecting moves, but it makes the battles go by so much quicker, and everything still has a really natural flow to it. And feel free to let us know in the comments down below why exactly you're watching this review of this classic game. Is it because you're itching as well to go back and play it, or have you actually never played it before? And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, then why don't you do your best job to wield a Buster Sword and slice open that subscribe button, and then ring that notification bell to be notified whenever Alex and I put up a new video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zian from Nintendo Life, and always remember, limits were meant to be broken.